No, I'm not concerned. We may have short-term a little pain, and people understand that. But long-term, the United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world. We have deficits with almost every country. Not every country, but almost. And we're going to change it. It's been unfair.
Canada and Mexico plan to retaliate against President Trump's tariffs, potentially impacting many multinational companies in the United States. Seema Modi's here. She's going to join us with some of those names right now. Seema, good morning.
Becky, good morning. Just hours after President Trump unveiled tariffs on our largest trading partner, Canada's Prime Minister vowing retaliation with 25% levy on over $100 billion worth of U.S. goods, targeting imports that are manufactured in key Republican states, as you've been discussing this morning, like bourbon from Kentucky, orange juice from Florida. Trudeau also encouraging his citizens to choose Canadian over American brands, putting companies like Brown-Forman, Budweiser, J.M. Smucker in focus. While power was not included in this round, Canada's Trade Minister Mary Ng recently telling us that it could be on the table.
I don't actually think Americans want us to not be selling electricity, oil, and gas to America because, I'm here in New York. The lights on Broadway, lots of it is Canadian electricity.
While Canada's energy was hit with a lower 10% tariff, RBC Capital says that could still lead to mildly higher gas prices in the U.S. Analysts say companies like Canadian Pacific that runs tracks from Canada through the U.S. to Mexico could be hit with elevated costs, as well as the globally diversified industrials that are moving this morning. KeyBank pointing to Terex, Carrier, and Trane Technologies, though Caterpillar and Eaton both making the point on their earnings calls last week that they've been making changes to their sourcing strategy since trade tensions picked up in 2018 and are well equipped to deal with tariffs. Those stocks are down right now. Agriculture players like Deere and AGCO also seen by the street as vulnerable. Jefferies noting that Trump did increase direct payments to farmers during the last trade war to cushion the blow. We'll see if that happens again. And when it comes to retail, analysts at Wedbush write that Mexico tariffs will most impact Best Buy, given its nearly 10 to 15% sales exposure to that country. Those tariffs expected to kick in tonight, Becky.
Okay, Seema, thank you very much. Joining us right now to talk more about this is White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. And Kevin, thank you for being with us this morning. Got a lot of questions and hoping you can give us a little insight into what's happening. First of all, are there talks taking place behind the scenes that could potentially stop these tariffs before they go in? Or is it your understanding that these will take effect at midnight tonight?
There have been a heck of a lot of talks over the weekend. You know, I've been in the White House for most of the weekend, and the thing I can say is that I think it's totally 100% being miscovered, this story. What you need to do is go back and read the executive order where President Trump was absolutely 100% clear that this is not a trade war, this is a drug war. There are perhaps 100,000 people last year that died of fentanyl, and the fentanyl is coming in across the Mexican and Canadian borders. 80, 90, 95% of Mexicans want the drug war to end, and the same is true in Canada. And I can tell you, I spent a lot of time in Canada. I was up in Alberta and walking on the rivers and fishing last summer, and I can tell you that there are places in big cities in Canada that look kind of like San Francisco because the drug war is being lost by this government in Canada as well. The good news is that in our conversations over the weekend, one of the things we've noticed is that the Mexicans are very, very serious about doing what President Trump said in the executive order, and that is getting more aggressive, much, much more aggressive about the drug war. But the Canadians appear to have misunderstood the plain language of the executive order, and they're interpreting it as a trade war. And I think that that's probably consistent with the policies that we've seen from this failed government in the past, where they'd let their own drug problem get out of control. And instead of addressing the drug problem, they want to blame the U.S. and perhaps get some political benefit out of saying that Trump's tried to create a trade war. Why would he do that, with Canada and Mexico? This is 100% about a drug war. It's 100% about fentanyl. And more people died last year than died in the Vietnam War. And President Trump has vowed to Americans that he's going to make that stop.
All right, Kevin, this is really interesting. Just the idea that maybe there's something that could be negotiated. Let me just make sure that I'm understanding this correctly from you. There's something that could be negotiated in the next 24 hours, in the next several days, that would mean the tariffs would either not be put on or would come back if it were to satisfy President Trump's concerns about what's happening at the border and the protections there that are taking this. I mean, we're calling it a trade war because Canada has already said that they're going to retaliate across the board with, tariffs on alcohol, coffee, clothing and shoes, furniture, household appliances, whiskeys, fruit from Florida, all of these issues. You're saying that this is really more of a negotiation to try and say, no, we want more focus on the border, and if you give that to us, these go away?
This is not what I'm saying. People need to read the executive order. President Trump has said this is about the fentanyl crisis, right? No, but so I don't know how somebody reads the executive order if you're Canada and then comes back and says, oh, we're going to start a trade war. We're saying we're really, really serious about going after fentanyl, and President Trump means it. And so there's all this fentanyl shipping across the borders. There, in the past, have been caravans of people parading across our border, carrying drugs and other things. And the response of our neighbors has not been, hey, we're going to help you stop this problem. It's go ahead and build a wall. So imagine, Becky, if I had like all this stuff going on in my house next to yours, and all this stuff was leaking into your property, and then you say, Kevin, you got to stop all that crime in your place. And I'm like, hey, you know what? Becky, build a wall. That's disrespectful. And this is the attitude the president has towards what's going on right now. He wants them to be respectful of the United States and help solve the problem rather than feed it.
So this is
we've
really
made a lot of
just
progress
the
with the
opening.
Mexicans.
This is really just the opening. Okay, so Mexico is really where the biggest problem for fentanyl is. We had one of our reporters earlier this morning, I haven't seen these figures myself, say that something like only 40 pounds of fentanyl was found at the Canadian border versus a much huger position down in the south part of this border. This is a way to get people to the table to say we are going to attack this and work with you, and that would call off all of these tariffs that are going to be put in place?
President Trump will decide what he's going to call off and what he's not, but he wants everybody at the table.
And certainly there's not a clear set of standards that say if you do X, Y, and Z, this won't happen.
Well, they clearly haven't done it in the past, and the amount of organized crime in the fentanyl space in Canada is also very disturbing. And so it's not just a measure of like 40 pounds here and there. The fact is the president has set a very clear guideline for people to work with him collaboratively. These are some of our best trading partners and our best friends to solve this incredible problem that has been spinning out of control, and that they've not really been addressing. And again, in Edmonton last summer, I walked out of my hotel and they had an ambulance there helping somebody who had OD'd, sadly, on fentanyl. And then as I'm walking to my restaurant, two people get in a fight with the cops over drugs right there just in downtown Edmonton. And this is just my one day when I'm staying there. And the fact is that Canada is like San Francisco, and it's spreading to the U.S., and it needs to stop. And that's what the Canadian people want, and it's what the American people want too.
Kevin, I won't dissuade you of your views or perspectives. I think the question mark on all of this is, do you need to implement the tariffs to gain leverage in these negotiations? Were the threat of tariffs enough or not? I'm reading the Wall Street Journal, which historically has come out on the side of Republicans and conservatives. They call it the dumbest trade war. And there's a question of how long, again, to Becky's question, this goes on. You would imagine you'd have more leverage, frankly, the longer it goes on. But there's the flip side, which is how palatable it is for the American public to take whatever pain is inflicted in the short term as well.
The thing I would say, Aaron, and I hope Joe's feeling better, by the way. I miss him today. The thing that I would say is that in the end, what President Trump has not only created a lot of leverage for the United States in this negotiation, but he's given the politicians in Canada and Mexico an enormous amount of leverage, because the people of Canada, they don't want to have a drug war that they lose, and the people of Mexico don't either. And now, because President Trump has raised the level and made it clear that this is the #1 policy issue for the United States this weekend, then all people in Canada and Mexico will support actions by those politicians to get ahead of the curve on the drug war. And so I think he's doing the politicians a favor.
Kevin, if you were listening to any of the NHL games this weekend in Canada, they were booing the Star-Spangled Banner. I mean, we are losing a lot of goodwill. And I just wonder, is this negotiation one that is simply on the drug trade, when you have President Trump also saying that Europe is next? Where does it come down with Europe? This seems like this is something that's being used more broadly, I understand it, to negotiate better positions for Americans. It seems like it is much more than a drug war.
This matter this weekend is 100% about the drug war, and I think that the outcome is likely to be very positive for Americans, Canadians, and Mexicans, because President Trump is forcing politicians throughout the continent to take this matter seriously, and there'll probably be a lot of cheers from Canadians as President Trump meets the Stanley Cup champions today, too, as well.
Kevin, can you react to this? So Scott Bessent, who's now the Treasury Secretary, wrote a letter January 31st, 2024, to his own investors. This is Key Square Capital Management. And he wrote the following: tariffs are inflationary. This is our Treasury Secretary who wrote this, not at the time, though, would strengthen the dollar. Hardly a good starting point for a U.S. industrial renaissance. So he's saying this is hardly a good starting point for a U.S. industrial renaissance. This is our Treasury Secretary saying this. Goes on to say the tariff gun will always be loaded and on the table, but rarely discharged. In this case, it was discharged. Can you just react to what he was saying?
I've not read what Scott was saying. I've certainly talked about tariffs with him quite a bit over the years and months. I've known Scott for many years. And the thing is that President Trump's agenda is a massive, massive supply-side agenda that's going to include big tax cuts, big deregulation, fair trade policy, drill baby drill, and the idea that if you were to look at like the worst model outcome of tariffs by themselves and say that President Trump's going to create inflation is basically means that you're going to get an F from me in my intro economics class. The fact is you need to look at all the policies together, and frankly, if you do, I think this is going to be one of the biggest supply side positive shocks that we've ever seen. And finally, I just want to say, going back to Canada, if I'm a market guy as Scott was, I'd be getting bullish on Canada and Mexico, because the political pressure on these people who've been making really, really bad choices is going to be very, very great. And the idea that a renaissance like you're seeing in the U.S. could happen throughout the world, I think, is really, really bullish for global economies.
Kevin, I know you well. We've known each other for a long time.
For sure.
It doesn't sound to me, it doesn't sound to me like you think these tariffs are either going to go into effect, or if they do, that they will last for long. I mean, you know far better than we do what kind of negotiations are taking place behind the scenes. And it sounds like you think Mexico is more willing to play and more willing to find solutions to these things than you think Canada is, based on what you've seen so far.
So far, President Trump is going to decide all of this, at a time that he chooses. But there are positive conversations that have happened over the weekend, and there are positive conversations that are going to happen between the leaders of these countries, over the next hours. And President Trump will then see what people have to offer and then make the call. But I can tell you that everybody's been very impressed by the seriousness of the Mexicans, the fact that they read the executive order and understood it, whereas the Canadians either didn't read it or were misrepresenting it to the Canadian people for political gain rather than trying to solve Canada's problems. And if you wonder why Canada has so many problems right now, it's because they have politicians like that.
I would ask you the economic implications. Steve Leisman's here. He did a flash survey asking a bunch of economists what they saw. I think every one of them in that flash survey said that if these tariffs did go into place, they expected GDP to go down and inflation to go up. Did you all run your own economic potential impact at the administration?
We're working on getting the final numbers for the president's budget as we speak. But I can tell you that the growth that we saw in President Trump's first term pre-COVID is looking like it's going to be a low number compared to what we get when we run all of president policies through the president's budget. And again, I would ask people to do this, and I've been very public about this on your show last fall, that if you want to analyze the policy effect of the Trump administration, you need to look at all of them and not just take like a couple of papers that say that tariffs are bad and say that's the whole thing that's going to happen. But if we model the whole thing, that we're definitely getting growth that is, as President said, looks like a golden age to us. And as you remember, Becky, that when we did this, we had a huge report where for every single policy we went through the academic literature and quantified why we thought we're going to get 0.5% from here and 0.75% from there and so on.
Right.
And we're doing that again. We're doing that again.
I guess my question would be is it's much broader than one simple economic policy. I think you're right. They all have to be taken together. But I think it's more than just economic policy that we're talking about here, too. This is national security. This is defense. And I wonder, are there experts in those arenas who are in the room when these negotiations and discussions are taking place?
Absolutely, there are. Absolutely, there are. And again, if you go back and think about the 100,000 people whose lives were lost because of fentanyl last year, and then think about it, in terms of the way the economy's value gains and losses, in government cost-benefit analysis, we say that each life costs us about $10 million. So think about, we're talking $1 trillion loss every year because of fentanyl. And so if we take some costs to fix that, then of course it's going to pass any cost-benefit test and any, test of humanity as well. The president's serious about solving this problem, and he's going to do it. He's going to do it.
Kevin, the president can look to the drug war and raise tariffs as a result, because tariffs are really the province of Congress to put on. If there's a national emergency like this, the president can say that he's going to raise tariffs as a result. When he says the European Union is next, what is the reasoning, what is the emergency there that would give him the authority to do that?
Well, we'll see what happens when we analyze it. The president has broad, long-run views about how tariffs could be part of a smart tax reform, and then he's got near-term things that he's trying to solve, like the fentanyl crisis. And the fact is that it's a very, very serious problem. It is an emergency when more people die last year than died during the entire Vietnam War, and that's why the president has put this right at the top of the agenda just as he's taking office.
And I guess one thing we've been trying to figure out, maybe you have more clarity on this, I'm sure you understand it better than I do. The president has said that he wants to do this to fight the drug war, meaning that if we can handle that, then the tariffs won't be put in place. But we've also talked to other people in the administration, including Peter Navarro, who've pointed out that, look, we're planning on raising money from some of these tariffs, that would be part of our way of balancing the budget. If it's a negotiation and we get what we want on that front and the tariffs aren't there, how do you fill the hole that would then be left for the money we thought we were going to raise?
Right. Again, for this matter, for this emergency order, it's about drugs and it's about the drug war. It's not about a trade war. And if in the future, as part of an overall reshaping of the tax code, the president uses tariffs and big supply-side tax cuts to create a golden age, then he'll do that. He's going to study that and let us know his final decision on that as the months come over the next few months. But right now, this issue is 100% about the drug war, not about the trade war.
Okay. Kevin, I want to thank you very much for being with us.
Great to see you again.
It's great to see you too, and this does, I think,
from the White House lawn, no less.
From the White House lawn, and I think that matters because I think this is messaging that is being sent out. I think this is clearly part of that negotiation too. Kevin, we appreciate your time.
Thanks, Vic.
Let's get over to Mike Santoli. He's standing by.